Okay, first things first, let's make sure you're in the right place. In this video, I'm going to be talking about everything you need to know for component 1 of the OCR version of GCSE Media Studies. So if you're not sure which exam board you're with, check with your teacher first because it might be EduCAS or AQA, and I'll be making separate videos for those. But in this one, it's all about OCR. So in this video, I'm going to go through component 1 in detail. This is the first exam you'll be sitting, all about television and the Lego movie. I'm going to go through each question one by one so you know what to expect, and I'll give you a couple of tips and tricks on the way in terms of timings and how you should write your answers. So let's start off by just talking about the course as a whole, just as a reminder. Your GCSE is made up of 3 components. Component 1 and 2 are both exams. They're worth 35% each, so 70% is exam-based. The remaining 30% is coursework. So component 1 is an exam with 70 marks up for grabs. It's an hour and 45 minutes with 30 of those minutes assigned to watching a clip from a TV drama. So technically, it's an hour and 15 of writing time. The paper is divided into 2 sections. Section A is worth 45 marks, and it's all about TV crime dramas. And section B is worth 25 marks, and it's all about film marketing. So this exam works out as roughly a minute per mark. If it's a 4-marker, you spend 4 minutes. Now, before we get started going through every single question bit by bit, I just want to take a moment to tell you about today's sponsor, who are Aura. Now, I'm usually quite picky about which sponsors I work with, but I truly believe the data protection services offered by Aura would be of value to you guys. Now, I don't know about you, but when it comes to my online security, I shamefully fall into the category of out of sight, out of mind. I know there are risks with data online, and there's not a day goes by where you don't seem to read a headline about some kind of data hack. But unless the problem is immediate and right in front of you, it just doesn't seem urgent until it's too late. Aura keeps you safe online by tracking the sites you've signed up to and unknowingly agreed to sharing your information online. And it automatically takes care of sending opt-out emails. Once these emails are sent, you should find that your data is no longer available anywhere that you don't want it to be. And it goes beyond the mega sites which sell your information and have so much information about you. Aura also monitors the dark web to track any cases of data being exposed. Data we freely input online, such as our address and bank information, that we wouldn't want falling into the wrong hands. You can go to my link at aura.com/Media Insider to try 14 days for free. More than enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. Right, back to the exam. Let's start off by talking about section A. In this section, you'll be asked 5 questions, all relating to the 2 crime dramas you've studied. Vigil, representing a contemporary drama with a strong female lead, and The Avengers, a 1960s espionage drama heavily influenced by the Cold War. More specifically, you'll have been looking at the pilot episode of Vigil and an episode from season 4 of The Avengers called The Gravediggers. Now, I'm not going to go into too much information about the 2 case studies in this video. I want to focus just on the exam itself, but check back to my channel regularly because I do plan on making specific case study videos for both of those. In fact, whilst you're there, why not subscribe if you haven't already? Now, the 5 questions in section A are usually grouped into the first 3, which are about one of the 2 crime dramas, and then questions 4 and 5, which will probably be about the other. Let's talk about the first 3 questions first. Whichever drama it ends up being about, whether it's The Avengers or Vigil, these questions will have you directly answering questions relating to the unseen clip, which you are shown 4 times during the first 30 minutes, with enough time to take some notes as well. Now you have a few minutes before the first screening to actually read the questions. So make sure you use this time to read questions 1, 2, and 3 so you know exactly what it is you're looking out for. Question 1 is a straight up analysis of media language. It's as simple as that. It's worth 5 marks, meaning you'll spend 5 minutes of it. And the cool thing with this one is the wording of the question doesn't even change. It will simply be asking you to analyze the use of camera work, sound, editing, or mise-en-scène. Check out these ones from recent years. Analyze how editing is used in the extract to create meaning. Refer to at least 2 examples in your answer. Analyze how camera work is used in the extract to create meaning. Refer to at least 2 examples in your answer. Analyze how sound is used in the extract to create meaning. Refer to at least 2 examples in your answer. So the way this question works is actually very formulaic. You get 1 mark for each example you give and 1 mark for your analysis of that example. So where does the 5th mark come from? That's down to your use of terminology, how technical and confident your answer is. So I always think of this as a really, really nice warm-up question. All you've got to do is get very, very good at analyzing those different aspects, explaining specific evidence and what it means using the correct terminology. It's an easy 5 out of 5. Here's an example of a 5-mark answer to a question asking how camera work is being used to make meaning in this clip from Vigil.
Guy. Anyway, see if you see him, ask him to show you the tattoo.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that, so you may as well just tell me.
Right, he wants a tattoo of his girlfriend on his arm. So he takes a photo of the two of them from his mum's place down to the tattoo parlour. Now, halfway through the job, he looks down and it's his mum that's getting tattooed on his arm.
Shut up.
No, I swear, mate.
The opening extreme wide shot of the boat in the sea, which acts as an establishing shot, tells the audience that this boat is incredibly remote. It illustrates the isolation of the location for this fishing boat and how far it is from aid if something were to go wrong, which we later see. After this, the freehand mid-shots of the crew talking is used to make the scene feel realist. It almost looks documentary-like, and the freehand shots add a sense of believability for the audience. Furthermore, the mid-shots create a space of familiarity and family between the crew, making the coming disaster feel more tragic. It really is as simple as that. You'll notice I gave 2 examples, the extreme wide shot and the freehand mid-shots. I gave detailed analysis as to how they were used, 5 marks. Now, a quick note on strategy. Like I said, you have 5 minutes to write this question, but I would seriously argue you could write it in less. In fact, what I recommend my students do is to actually write their answer during the first screening. As soon as you spot your 2 pieces of evidence to analyze, start writing your answer. You might have noticed that the 2 examples I gave were from the first 30 seconds or so of that clip. Start writing, and before the second clip even starts, you can start taking notes on how you're going to answer questions 2 and 3. Okay, on to question 2, which is worth 10 marks, so 10 minutes to write it. And this time we are going to have to properly plan what we write. Now, the great thing with this question is just like question 1, it's very formulaic and it always follows this pattern. Analyze how far the extract creates something. In your answer, you must analyze aspects of the extract using examples to support your analysis. Judge how far aspects create something. What does the something mean? Well, that's the only part of the question that changes year on year. In the past, we've had conflict, tension, suspense. Otherwise, the wording's the same. So how do we answer that question? Well, in the first one, you were asked for a specific element of media language and how that made meaning. Whereas in this one, you're going to have to provide evidence from across the board. We want to see a range of analysis and how camera work, editing, and mise-en-scène combine to make the desired meaning. In that sense, it's a really nice question. They kind of give you the analysis. They tell you what the endpoint is, be it tension, conflict, or whatever. All you've got to do is explain how to get there. So let's try this question out. Let's work with the question, analyze how far the extract creates tension. All we need to do is give examples of how far those elements create tension. Now, here's how I'd recommend you plan for this question during the next screening. Write that word in the middle of your planning page, and around it, write cam, edit, MES, and sound. All you've got to do now is just pick a few examples for each category that results in tension. You'll then have all the evidence you need for an excellent answer. Now, you've only got 10 minutes for your answer, which isn't a very long time. So I would recommend aiming for 3 paragraphs, and in each one, focus on one of those areas of media language and how they combine to make, in this case, tension. Here's an example for one of the 3 paragraphs that you might write about how sound creates tension. In the opening sequence, sound is used to create tension in several ways. Firstly, the non-diegetic music features a low-pitched horn, which sounds both threatening and deep. This creates connotations of the depths of the submarine and the sort of sound we'd hear underwater. In terms of diegetic sound, the shouting of the men on the boat as it sinks is juxtaposed with the calm voices of the officers on the submarine. This contrast makes the fishermen's cries for help all the more helpless as we hear how completely unaware of the situation the submarine officers are. Finally, the sound effects of the trawler grinding and overheating are jarring and immediately identify a sense of threat. This combined use of sound is highly effective in creating a sense of tension. All you've got to do is that times 3. Notice how I was using an awful lot of that specific terminology like diegetic, non-diegetic, sound effect, connotations, and was literally just analyzing the extent to which they contributed to the sense of tension. Do that for 2 more areas across 3 paragraphs and you will be fine. Now, the last of those first 3 questions about this clip is a 15 marker, which means you have 15 minutes to write it. And this one actually introduces the whole theoretical framework. So you'll also be writing about industry and audience alongside media, language, and representation. Again, this is a very formulaic question with a set pattern. And it will almost always ask about how certain representations are constructed, usually focusing on stereotypes. Here are some examples. How does the extract challenge traditional stereotypes of gender? How far does the extract challenge the stereotypes of race and ethnicity? How far does the extract create an anti-stereotypical representation of women? That's the initial question, and then it's always followed by this. In your answer, you must analyze the representations in the extract, giving detailed examples, refer to relevant contexts, make judgments and reach conclusions. You will be rewarded for drawing together relevant elements from your full course of study. So there's quite a few elements to this question. First off, it's a how far question. In other words, they're looking for a balanced argument. To what extent does this happen? In your opinion, how far does the extract challenge the gender stereotypes or create an anti-stereotypical representation of women? But equally important, you need to consider how much is the opposite true. Essentially, you've got to present both sides of the argument. Obviously, whatever the argument you present is, we need to back it up with detailed examples. So here's a great example of how you might start off your answer. In this clip, the representation of gender mostly conforms to traditional stereotypes, with the vast majority of the crew and all the senior officers as males, although DCI Silver and Amy, the lead characters, are strong females who challenge the men in positions of power. This is what I sometimes refer to as a big answer. As soon as you get into these 15-mark questions, you need to create an argument. You need to set out your table, outline your point. I've actually done a video specifically about the big answer technique, which you can watch on my channel. But once you've set out this argument, all you need to do is provide the evidence to prove your point. If you're saying it's not stereotypical, that's fine. Where's your evidence? If you're saying it's completely stereotypical, that's fine. Where's your evidence? Here's an example of how I could back up my point. For example, when the female officer approaches the commander and suggests that they may have intercepted a fishing boat, she is immediately dismissed and her idea, despite being correct, is made to look foolish. This is a very brief example I've given there, but it's a great example of how you need to quickly answer the question and start providing specific evidence. Now, the next key part of this question is it says you need to refer to relevant contexts and draw on your full course of study. In other words, having just analyzed some of the representations and given some examples, you now need to look at why were they represented this way? Has it got something to do with the time period in which it was made? Is it to do with the producer, whether they're a public service broadcaster or a commercial company? Or is it something to do with the target audience? Either way, it's not enough in this question to just tell us what representations there are. You also need to say, why do you suppose they've been represented like that? So for the Avengers, why might the representations of Britishness be very stereotypical? Could it be because of the popularity of the espionage films like James Bond in the wake of the Cold War? Or why might Emma Peel be represented as a strong, if frequently sexualized woman? Could it have to do with the feminist movement of the 60s? Likewise, in Vigil, are the representations of gender and sexuality reflective of the Equality Act of 2010, or perhaps evidence of the BBC's public purpose to represent all the diverse people of the UK? You need to factor this into your answer next. Finally, the question will ask you to reach judgments and conclusions. In other words, they want your opinion. There's not necessarily a right answer to this one. They just want to show that you actually have an opinion on how these representations are being constructed. Here's an example of how you might conclude. To conclude, I think that the extract does more to challenge gender stereotypes than conform to them. Yes, the captain and the first officer are male, but the way DCI Silver challenges them, and on some occasions exposes their corruption, is far more empowering for women. So, to summarize, here's how you need to structure your answer. First, set out your argument. State clearly what is the answer to the question. Do you agree or disagree with the statement, and to what extent? Also, try and present the counterargument. Next, we're looking for a detailed paragraph that backs up your argument and offers some specific evidence to support it. Also do this for the counterargument. Then write a paragraph that offers a contextual explanation for the representation. Whatever you've said it looks like, try to explain why with either historical, political, or cultural contexts, or consideration of the audience or producer. And finally, you need to conclude and show your opinion. Revisit your opening argument and state clearly where you stand on it. So those are the unique questions. The good news is things get a little bit more straightforward from here. But how should you revise for these questions? Well, needless to say, your terminology needs to be really on point. So I'd recommend you are definitely okay with your sound, camera work, and editing terminology. I've got videos for those all on my channel. Mise en scène, you don't have to worry about so much because it's very often a case of just describing the clothing and the background and the setting. Secondly, we know whatever the clip is you're shown, it will definitely be from the 2 set episodes. So I would absolutely recommend rewatching these episodes at least once before the exam. Vigil is easy to find on the BBC iPlayer or BritBox, and the Avengers episode, the Gravediggers, it's a bit more tricky. I mean, I bought it on Amazon for a couple of pounds, but it's worth it so that you can rewatch it. As you watch each episode, just be constantly analyzing, looking out for camera work, looking out for mise en scène, sound, and how it makes meaning. Really, by the end of this course, you should be in a position where you're analyzing everything you watch anyway. And finally, make sure you're okay with the contexts. Vigil was made by the BBC, the Avengers was made by ITV. So what? Vigil was made in the 2020s, the Avengers was made in the 1960s. So what? Okay, on to question 4. This is another 5 marker, which means 5 minutes. And this one will ask you something about the TV industry broadly. It will usually ask you to explain something with a couple of examples. Here are some of the questions from previous years. Explain 2 ways that audiences gain pleasure from watching television using Blomler and Katz's theory. Explain 2 requirements of public service broadcasting. Refer to the BBC in your answer. Explain 2 factors that affect how audiences interpret representations in television programs. So, just like we did in question 1, we need 2 answers which we expand upon with the appropriate terminology to get the full 5 marks. Now, really, anything could come up in these questions, so a good place to start would be to make sure that you are up to speed with the named theories that you are supposed to be comfortable with in GCSE media studies. These are uses and gratification theory, reception theory, and Todorov's narrative theory. I'll put links down in the description to videos I've made for each of these. But essentially, we're looking for 2 paragraphs, 1 for each answer, thoroughly explained with terminology. Don't waste too much time on this one. Get it done, 5 minutes, move on. So finally, section A, the last question, it's another 10 marker and it resembles question 3, but this time you won't have the clip to refer to, and it will always be about whichever drama you didn't write about in questions 1, 2, and 3. So if that was about Vigil, this will be about the Avengers, and vice versa. Again, let's take a look at a few examples of this question and see if you can spot the similarities. Explain how historical contexts influence the representations in television programs. Refer to the Avengers to support your answer. Explain how social and/or cultural contexts influence the representations of Britishness in television programs. Refer to the set episode of the Avengers you have studied to support your answer. So it's always going to be an explain question, and it's always going to be about the influence of a given context on the representations you see in television. So to break this question down even more simply, it's essentially asking, the Avengers was made in the 1960s, so what? That's historical context. The Avengers was made by the ITV, so what? Vigil was made in the 2020s, so what? If you can start looking at these questions like this, it'll really help you get to the guts of the question. It's asking how the TV program's been impacted by something. Now, obviously, the big difference between question 5 and question 3 is you won't have just had that clip that you can refer to. So it's really, really important that for both dramas, you have some examples stored away in your mind that you can refer to without having watched them. So I would recommend for Vigil, pick a specific scene that you feel very comfortable with, whether it's when she first arrives on the submarine or when she's having the flashback. Or for the Avengers, you might want to talk about some examples of where John Steed is being a gentleman, or when Emma Peel first arrives dressed up as the nurse. Have these examples in mind for question 5. My recommendation is again to aim for 3 paragraphs. In paragraph 1, identify what representation you're going to refer to and how it's portrayed before explaining how the cited context impacted that representation. For example, stereotypical representations of Britishness are used in the Avengers set episode, with John Steed reflecting gentlemanly, upper-class British attitudes of the Empire, which convey a sense of authority and superiority. This is no doubt impacted by the social and cultural context of the suave gentleman spy being established by the spy genre with successful films like Dr. No in the 1960s. In paragraph 2, you basically just need to prove your point. Hopefully you've just made a really good argument in your first paragraph. Now you need to prove it with analysis. So if you're saying John Steed is the perfect British gentleman as per all spy dramas in the 60s, how is that being constructed? Is it through what he's wearing, his actions, the way he speaks? Is there a particular scene that exemplifies this? Finally, link back to the context that you mentioned in paragraph 1 and thoroughly explain what was going on in the time or in society that explains why that representation was chosen. And just like that, we're done with section A. Now, this is a really important time to do a time check. You've just had 45 marks, which means you should have spent 45 minutes and you should easily have 30-ish minutes left for section B. Section B is worth 25 marks and it's all about the marketing of the Lego movie. Again, hopefully I'll get around to making a specific case study video just about that one, but for now, it's important to note that you will be expected to talk about the movie posters, the ITV trailer, which includes the TV spot, and the video game. Question 6 is a 1 marker, which means you can spend less than a minute on it. You either know it or you don't. It's asking you for knowledge of the industry. So don't stress over it too much. Write your answer and move on. What kind of question? Well, it really could be anything, like identifying who regulates film or video games, or who produced one of the products. What is meant by a word like conglomerate? Like I said, it's not worth stressing over too much. It's worth 1 mark. Much better to get that mark than not, but it's best to invest our time where it's most needed. 5, 10, 15 markers. The best thing you can do is really just spend a little bit of time to make sure you know all of the industry information for the Lego movie. Who produced it, who distributed it, who made the video game, etc. Question 7 is a 4-mark question, so 4 minutes, and it will ask you something about the film industry. Here are some of the questions we've had in the past. Explain 1 reason why films are regulated. Use the Lego movie as an example in your answer. Explain 2 reasons why film companies producing films such as the Lego movie can afford large production budgets. Explain 2 ways that video games are funded. Now, these are all very knowledge-based questions, and you'll notice that they're all industry-based. So make sure you're happy with the funding, the business models behind each element of the case study. Who produced and distributed the film? Who developed and published the video game? How did they generate money? How do they synergize with each other to make a more successful whole? As far as writing these answers go, these ones are again very formulaic because it's a 4-marker. In other words, give the set number of required answers and develop them using the correct terminology, and as many numbers, as many facts as you can remember, such as the budget or who made it. Question 8 is another 10-marker, and it will probably be about audience, but it could also be about industry. This means it's probably going to focus on elements of study about how the audience is targeted or how they interact with the elements, such as the video game. Here are some examples of what we've had in the past. Explain how releasing a video game based on a film helps promote both the game and the film. Refer to the Lego movie video game in your answer. Explain at least 2 reasons why Hollywood film companies use merchandising such as the Lego movie video game to promote films. How do Hollywood films target global mass audiences? Refer to the Lego movie in your answer. Now, since this is a 10 marker, you need to spend 10 minutes on it. And it's another one where you have to provide an extended response rather than just trying to fit it within a set criteria. This means to get the top band, you need to show a thorough understanding of the given topic. So you need to be aiming for 3 paragraphs on this one. In your first paragraph, outline your point. Come up with your argument. In it, remember to show as much terminology and context as possible. So make sure you're talking about horizontal and vertical integration, tentpole productions, or synergy, whatever relates to the question. These are all concepts you'll have studied in your lesson, and you really need to show that off now. The way I always put it to students is like this. You could quite correctly say the following. The video game helps the movie sell and vice versa because people using it will be exposed to marketing materials that will make them want to watch it. It's true, it's kind of basic. We could say the exact same thing, but more comprehensively like this. The game synergizes with the movie by providing intertextual cutscenes of the film between levels that make the audience want to see the full film. Likewise, audiences who go to see the film may wish to have a more interactive experience of the game and play it as a family, gratifying them with social interaction in the video game. It's basically the same answer, but which one would you give more marks to? And finally, we come to question 9, another 10 marker. Now, this is what I meant earlier when I said, don't waste time early on with the smaller marked questions. 20 marks are available between the last 2 questions. And if that's where we're most likely to run out of time, I would rather lose those marks on a 4 marker or a 1 marker than here. So make sure you allocate enough time. Now, this is another analysis question, and you'll simply be asked to analyze one of the set products relating to the Lego movie. Now, this may be one of the movie posters, in which case it tends to be provided for you as an insert, but it's also just as likely to be about the TV advert for ITV or from the video game, in which case you'll need to have key points for each memorized. Needless to say, it's really important that you're familiar with each of these, especially the trailer, before the exam, and I'll post a link to that down in the description. So, you may well be asked to analyze the representations within one of these products, such as analyze how heroes and villains are represented in the Lego movie trailer. Analyze the use of genre conventions in the trailer for the Lego movie. Now, by this stage in the course, I'd expect you to be fairly confident with analyzing anything, seen or unseen. So just make sure you're okay with that terminology like we used way back in question 1, and make sure you've watched all of these clips with key points made for each of them. I'd also make sure you're okay with some of the different concepts that contribute to media language. So genre conventions, narrative, intertextuality, stereotypes, alongside those ones that we know for media language. The key with this question is to aim for 3 paragraphs. First, outline your point, your big answer, like I've already referred to, in which you detail how the given aspect is constructed or portrayed. And in the second 2 paragraphs, provide detailed examples of how that is being achieved. So really don't waste any time in getting to the analysis. Give specific evidence and explain exactly what the connotations of those are. So there we have it, guys. That's component 1 in a nutshell. 70 marks and how they are allocated across those 9 questions. From here, like I said, make sure you go back and check out each of your case studies. But I'd also recommend checking out some past papers, which you should be able to find from your teachers. Go back, and the more comfortable you are with the format and what to expect, the better you're going to do in this exam. As always, I'd like to say a massive thank you and a shout out to my amazing patrons who managed to motivate me and keep me going with this channel. It's a great place if you've not been there to access me, join part of the community and access some exclusive content. And I'll see you in the next one, which is going to be all about component 2. I'll get that one out as quick as I can, no doubt before this year's exams. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Good luck with your exams, and I will see you in the next one.